this team can be in the draft. Everybody, welcome into the program. Mace, this time of April is almost my favorite time because I get to see what everyone else has been doing. I believe our good friend Dane Brugler, his Beast, is coming out for The Athletic. It's one of the top draft guides, one of the most comprehensive draft guides you could get. I remember when Dane was 18 and he was working for free for NFL Draft Scout, and he was getting paid in hard drives of the college football games from the season. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but you talk about Brugler's been getting it done for 10, 15 years, whatever the number is. So that's coming out. Matt Waldman's rookie scouting portfolio is out. The Lindys draft magazine is out. I love it because I take till April to do all my research. And then now is when I kind of check in and say oh, well, this guy that I trust likes this guy a little bit more. So this type of April, for some could be paralysis by analysis, but I actually take it easy in April leading up to the draft and just kind of check out what everyone else has been doing.
Yeah, because inevitably you start seeing what others are saying and okay, what did I miss on that player? Let me go back and take a deeper look. And also, one thing, as we start getting closer, this is where we can start aggregating things a little bit. And what I mean by that is one thing that I like to have on hand as I do kind of a live coverage of the draft, whatever place I've been, is I always keep this Excel file of a bunch of player rankings, mine and then about 8 others going into the draft. And then I kind of aggregate to get an average, and then it's something that I use as we get to the draft because I don't want to just go by what I'm thinking. I want to get some other opinions in there that I respect and trust, and then when you get to the draft, it's that's where when we start saying, okay, this player went unexpectedly. What I'm usually doing that is perception wise is based off of several people evaluating these players, not just myself. And so it's not just me maybe that's surprised, but a bunch of people who are surprised. And so I think this is what it's about. It's seeing what other people think, and then doing a little your own cross checking here as we count down to the draft.
Yeah, and I think it's always fun to check in and see what other people that you trust are saying, because it's okay, we all have different opinions. We can all watch the same film. I've had this conversation with Chad Ryder from NFL Network, dear friend of mine, and we all watch the same film, and we can have wildly varying opinions at times. And to me, that's fascinating because it's well, I saw this, well, you saw this. It's referencing, cross-referencing each other, and it's fun to me.
Yeah, and I mean it's interesting to look at that, and then you start looking at data, and the data can mislead as well because you've got to factor in level of competition. You have to factor it. Guy can have a big game, and okay, that biggest game was against the third team cornerback who's going to be selling insurance in a year, right? I mean that's the other thing that comes into play here is. We can cite numbers, but I think that can be a little bit deceptive without proper context, and I think that's the other thing that kind of comes into play here. I mean, I've got a bunch of Excel files that I dive into, and I'll cite them from time to time, but it's not everything. It's only part of the puzzle.
Part of the puzzle as we continue on. And sometimes the Broncos news isn't about the Broncos, but then it becomes about the Broncos because everything's about the Broncos. Orange and Blue Today, presented by Sean Ponda, Cecil Lamey, Andrew Mason, and Latavius Murray is visiting the Bills. Concern level, Mace, because the Bills earlier this offseason added Damian Harris, and I've often said that they need a hammer, man. All these little backs, and I do admire Devin Singletary, but James Cook, he's explosive, but he's a little guy. And they need someone other than Josh Allen when it's 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 for them this season. That's going to be Damian Harris, but they are taking a look at Latavius Murray, and we've often said or speculated maybe Murray would be there in August. Well, maybe not.
Yeah, and this is what happens when you roll the dice, right? I mean, he hasn't signed anything, so it's not like it's happened just yet. But if you gamble that a player is going to be available, then you basically give license for anyone else to take them. And the other thing is also, what you're saying is that, okay, yeah, we'd like to have you back, but it's not really that important. If it were important enough to the Broncos to say, we need Latavius Murray come hell or high water, they could have had him back last month, problem solved. But instead, they decided they would rather have Samaje Perine, right? Latavius Murray, you can get him, but there are other backs that you can also get as well. I mean, if you're if talking about those 8 to 12 or 13-year veterans who end up popping onto rosters, there are multiple guys who can fit that bill. And so it's fascinating that Murray is taking this visit with Buffalo. And maybe it'll put a little bit of pressure on the Broncos, but I don't think it's going to spur an action, because I think the Broncos very much were going into this process thinking that the first path to find another running back was through the draft. And if they find that running back through the draft, then Murray kind of becomes redundant.
Yeah, draft undrafted free agents. The Broncos are going to add to the running back room, and we'll see that. Of course, we got it all covered for you at denversports.com. Mace, there's a couple of things where they can get Murray or a Murray parallel back, if you will, because here's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say Murray signs with the Bills, and in the middle of August he's cut. Well, now you have Murray again. Or Murray signs with Team X, and they have to cut a player, Jonathan Williams or whoever. I always love bringing up Jonathan Williams. The reason Kyle Sloter did not make the Broncos' final roster was because of Jonathan Williams. There's always going to be a Latavius Murray adjacent, I think was the word I was looking for, running back that could be available, even if Latavius Murray is scooped up by another team.
I mean, you just kind of go down the list and look at the players who are still on the market. I mean, Kareem Hunt is still sitting out there, right? Leonard Fournette still sitting out there. Mark Ingram still sitting out there. Gio Bernard still sitting out there. Has Jerick McKinnon re-signed?
I thought Jet did re-sign, but I'm not sure on that. And then I was thinking maybe Ronald Jones.
He's a free agent.
Is Ronald Jones still out there?
Let me look and see here. Yeah, Jerick McKinnon hasn't signed with anybody.
Okay. Well, there's your perfect pass catching back. There's your explosion.
Ronald Jones is a Cowboy.
I thought Rojo got picked up somewhere. Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, you look around, and there's Latavius Murray. I mean, there's some, like, David Johnson's still out there. I think he's basically washed at this point.
Yeah.
But you've got some names out there to where you say, okay, we'll just go to the next name on the list. I mean, shoot, if you really want to tweak Kansas City a little bit, maybe you place a call to Jerick McKinnon.
See what's
and bring
out there.
him in for a visit. Yeah, why not? But what it tells you is, as much as you liked Latavius Murray, and I personally would like the Broncos to have him back because he's reliable. He's got a good set of hands. He doesn't fumble very often, historically over the last few years. He's not the only guy that you can bring in. Running backs are fungible assets.
Right.
And you can find somebody who can do for you not exactly what Latavius Murray did, but can be a productive part of a tandem backfield in case you don't get Javonte Williams back. So it's one of those things where it's interesting. I don't think it's a big deal, and like I just mentioned, I mean, there are a bunch of guys that you could lean to, and I didn't even mention Ezekiel Elliott, who's still out there right now. Although
you gave us like half dozen names.
Yeah, these are guys, they're on the market for a reason, and the biggest reason why is you start looking at the age and accumulated wear and tear. Like, Jerick McKinnon is 30. Zeke is 27, but he's an old 27 with how he got run into the ground.
Right.
Ditto playoff Lenny at age 28. Mark Ingram's 33. He's on the other side of 30. I mean, there's reasons why all these running backs are still available and others were signed, but doesn't mean they can't have value. But the point being, you don't have to make that spend now when you know that you can bring somebody in and plug them in if the need arises. And you mentioned guys who could be cut as you get closer to get closer to the start of the season. The market's always a fluid thing.
Yeah, and the the draft is full of running backs that you could select, and the guys that don't make it and are priority free agents, they'll have quality talent. And honestly, Mason, I think you wrote about it, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you wrote up Philip Lindsay's first game. Like, I'm looking at the XFL for if you really wanted backs. Now, you don't need to look at the XFL, although it's wise to have your feelers out in every place that you can find talent. But the draft is where that talent is coming from. But I'm also looking at other leagues for that talent just to take a peek to see what people are doing. And the Sea Dragons, I think they're the hottest team in the XFL, and they lost in Lindsay's first game.
Oh, I mean, and Lindsay, it was the first game. He wasn't that great, and he did have a touchdown, averaged under 3 yards per carry. And honestly, he looked a little chunky. And I know chunky, right? I mean,
let me finish.
Yeah, he looked. There was what John Facenda once described in an NFL film's narration as a businessman's bulge. Businessman's bulge over the basically over the waistband. He used that to describe Sonny Jurgensen back in the day. Sonny had a little bit of a paunch to him, right? Heck of a quarterback, Hall of Famer. Had a little bit around the midsection. And there was one photo I think the Sea Dragons put out, Philip Lindsay, and I'm like, man, that belt's doing some work there.
He's had the medium on, right? This is a medium jersey, so
a little belly protruding. I mean, and I'm just saying, I saw that, and I admire him for going back, wanting to continue take another shot, but. I think there are probably younger running backs, more spry running backs, who might get looks out of the XFL other than Philip Lindsay.
And isn't it crazy? I mean, we'll get back on topic in just a little bit, Mace, but just think about that. I mean, the names that you listed, and what is Lindsay himself, like 27? Yes. Whatever. But you're 27 and you're done.
Yes.
You're 28 and you're done. If you're an old man like Mark Ingram, you're 33 and you're done. Like, you and I are well above 33 and well above 27, and it's so odd that in this game, running backs, the shelf life is so incredibly short.
I mean, I don't know if we're going to see many. Forget about the Frank Gores, who Gore played 17 years.
Yeah.
We're not going to see many running backs getting into year 8, year 9, even, right? I mean, the turnover is so rapid. I mean, as much as everybody likes Javonte Williams, he's had a significant injury in his second year. He's already halfway through his rookie contract.
Right.
And I don't look at Javonte Williams right now as somebody who's likely to be a Bronco for the long term, unfortunately. Part of it is the injury. Part of it is just how you turn over running backs. If you follow baseball, bullpens are the same way. It feels like unless you have a select few who are elite at the position, one of that elite few, that you are basically turning it over from year to year. And that's where analytics and cap management have come into play. The evolution of football, the primacy of the passing game as opposed to the rushing game, that's come into play as well. Right. I mean, that's why the most valuable running backs are the ones who can get it, who probably can get involved in the passing game to a lot of teams. Like that's one of the reasons why, for example, I'm actually a little surprised that the Chiefs didn't re-sign Jerick McKinnon right away. Now, granted, they are in a cap crunch trying to squeeze in a bunch of big contracts, including Patrick Mahomes, on whom the numbers are going up and exploding as you get into some of the more costly years cap-wise of his deal. But he's somebody who looks like he can still have value. But basically now, I mean, we talk about Alvin Kamara and how valuable a pick he was for the New Orleans Saints in 2017, being a third-round pick. And they re-signed him. If the Broncos find another Alvin Kamara, does he end up seeing a second contract? Because right now, I think there's a good chance that Javonte Williams, with his situation, doesn't see a second contract either. Because
Right.
because generally speaking, now you're getting the best early in their career. Look at Zeke. Okay, Ezekiel Elliott is a prime example of a running back who was terrific at the start, got worn down, isn't close to what he was. That's why the Cowboys chose Tony Pollard over him. And you can't blame them. It's the right call. He's got more tread left on his tires at this point. And then, I mean, if you know, and someone will say, "What about Derrick Henry?" Well, Derrick Henry's a unicorn. Okay.
Yeah, and Derrick Henry's a flashback, a throwback to what we used to see, because like Ricky Waters had 10,000-yard seasons, Thurman Thomas, Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, Mace. That 90 stuff is done. You know, like we're not going to see those guys. You mentioned what 8 or 9 years. I was thinking you're going to say like a double digits. Like we're not even going to get close to that for running back. So yeah, Derrick Henry. And they didn't use Henry as much as they have the last few years. The beginning of Derrick Henry's career, they'd like forget about him until November and then be like, oh, yeah, Derrick Henry. And then he'd run the ball and they'd win a bunch of games. So, like, Henry actually has lower miles. I had to correct our friend Mike Kliss because he's like, there's a bunch of tread on his tires. Like, actually low tread. More miles, low tread. You want high tread. And that's why we look at these running backs that maybe weren't the featured guy all the time in college the way, let's say, like a Ricky Williams. When we talk about Roshan Johnson, right? That makes him so attractive because he has low mileage, lots of tread on those tires.
Right. And teams are understanding that more and more now. I mean, 10 years ago, Monte Ball, who had a lot of wear on those tires, didn't have as much tread as others. He's taken in the second round. Nobody bats an eye at it. It's like, wow, this incredibly productive back, good pass catcher, has all the tools you want. He should be a great pick for that offense. And nowadays, someone like Monte Ball, I think, would linger well into day 3. I mean, running backs in the draft in general, their value has declined, but the high accumulation of wear and tear backs, their value has declined as well. I mean, if you're looking at a running back and they come into the NFL with 700 touches in their college career, that's not a good sign.
No. It's not what teams are looking for. I always give Monte a bunch of credit for multiple things, beating the problems with alcohol that he'd had, and we always root for Monte Ball. But I remember the night he was drafted, and I was at Radio City Music Hall, and I'm on the air. I'm just blasting the pick, right? I'm like, this is terrible. What are they doing? Monte Ball can't play. And believe it or not, it was Raj, who was my producer. He gets in my ear, and he goes, Monte's on hold waiting to talk to you, because we were lining up the players after they were drafted. And so I'm on the air. I'm just ripping the Monte Ball pick. Like, this is terrible. This is awful. Monte's like on hold listening to me just tear him apart. But he was fine. He was always good to me. I've always appreciated that. You know, it's like Trevor Siemian. When Trevor would call himself a slappy and just like stare at me because he knew I called him a slappy like anytime I could. Like, I appreciate that. I have a big mouth and I have opinions on sports, Mace. I'm sorry.
Don't we all? Isn't that why we're here? The question is, was he a happy slappy? Or was he an angry slappy?
Yeah, happy hero baby pup. What is the
happy scrappy hero pup?
Happy scrappy hero pup. Okay.
Yes,
and that's about the only title quote we can use from that scene.
Yes, the one film title, fictional film title from that scene in Clerks that we can actually mention.
Yeah. She loves it, obviously. Specific is the next title that we have here for our topics, and I want to bring up Dalton Kincaid. You know, I've talked about tight end plenty enough, so we don't need to belabor this, Mace, unless you'd like. I got spare time. But Dalton Kincaid, get this. First off, he's been cleared from the back injury, right? And I have him as the number 1 tight end in this class. And he's specifically an F. Like, he is a receiving threat. He is a super-sized receiver. Don't ask him to block. He's a super-sized receiver. He's dangerous. He's fast. He's physical. Like, Dalton Kincaid's got everything. And you see who he's had extensive, these are the words, extensive visits with: the Chargers, the Chiefs, and the Raiders. Curiously absent from that list are the Broncos. So, Mace, I think it kind of leans into what we've said, specifically specific. The Broncos are looking for a certain type of tight end because Dalton Kincaid is going to be a playmaker. Every team in the AFC West is interested in him except for the Broncos.
Because the Broncos have those guys who can be moved tight ends. They're looking for somebody who can work in line. They can be an effective pass catcher as well, but they're looking for somebody who's going to get in line and is going to block, and is going to be less about what they're doing outside the numbers and more about what's going on down the seam and between the hash marks. And that's not Dalton Kincaid's game. It's Luke Musgrave's game. Yes. You and I have been talking about the Broncos visiting with Luke Musgrave for several days now. That's, and the tight ends that they are looking at in general, they are the all-around tight ends. And I think it's interesting also the fact that everybody else in the division is talking with Kincaid. The Raiders just, of course, lost Darren Waller, and that's really, really their own stupidity on, I think.
Raiders being a Raider.
Yeah, Raiders gonna Raider. The Chargers really, I think, need an upgrade at tight end. I think Kincaid actually makes a ton of sense for them.
Very much so.
Yeah, they've been all right at tight end. They had Gerald Everett last year. I think they can do better, and I think Kincaid gives them that opportunity. The Chiefs, well, with the Chiefs, it's first of all, it's long-term planning for down the line if you don't have Travis Kelce. But in the short term, Kelce is an inline tight end, as we know. He can go in space, he can be the move tight end, but he will line up and block and be a plus player in that part of the game. So if the Chiefs are looking at Kincaid, what they're looking at is, man, we could go with some two tight end sets, but Kincaid's going to be our guy operating in space, and Travis Kelce's going to operate from the inline spot, and then figure it out. You figure out how to stop that. I don't know that a lot of teams would have answers for both of them on the field at the same time. So honestly, of those teams doing that, the Chiefs are the ones that concern me. But it does also show the Broncos are looking for a specific type. Now, what I hope comes out of this is they still get someone who can be an effective pass catcher, because with all respect to Jeff Hireman, I don't want this to be another Jeff Hireman pick.
Yeah.
Hireman was just a guy. And
painfully so.
The whole notion of him was, he can be in line, he can block as well as being able to make some plays down the seam. But it just never launched with him. That ACL tear in rookie minicamp in May of 2015, a couple weeks after the Broncos drafted him, that didn't help his cause in any way, shape, or form. But that's one thing about the tight ends. There aren't many that can actually be all around. There's a reason why George Kittle gets paid and Travis Kelce gets paid. Is because, I'll use this phrase for the second time in this show, they're unicorns. They are rare. And if you're going to find that guy, with all respect to most of the tight ends the Broncos are talking to, the only one who can be that dual threat guy that could be within reasonable range via a trade to move up and get is Luke Musgrave.
You're a unicorn of Broncos analyst, Mace.
Oh,
I actually texted a buddy of mine because he asked me, who's the best Broncos reporter? I said, well, reporter's different than analyst. I said, the best Broncos analyst, I had Jeff Legwald, I had you there. I was texting one of my buddies who's a radio producer in New York City. I was like, we've got some really good analysts. Reporters, and God bless reporters. If you're a great reporter, go do your thing, be a reporter. Being an analyst is different. And we've got unicorns abounding on this program. Orange and Blue today, presented by Champ Honda, Cecil Amy, Andrew Mason. The Broncos are picking at 67 unless there's an exception to the rule. Mace, this is kind of piggybacking off your conversation and one of the clips from Coffee Break. Watch us here on our digital platforms for denversports.com. But you had talked about a certain quarterback that you would trade up for into round 2 even, or earlier in round 3. So let's talk about it. I'm writing up tackles today for denversports.com. I have a tackle I'd move up for. It's not a great tackle class. I got a C grade on it overall, but there is a tackle I'd move up for. But there's a specific player that you would have as an exception to the rule. Who is it?
Well, the most prominent one would be Hendon Hooker, who we're talking about. And I doubt they will. Sean Payton really likes Jarrett Stidham, sees some untapped potential in him. But if Hooker is falling to about pick 50, I think that's where the Broncos really need to have a hard conversation about whether to move up and take him. Because to me, he is a first-round talent. The other thing on Hendon Hooker is because he has that torn ACL that he had last year, there's something interesting that you can do with him contractually. And that is you can have him on your team, but on the non-football injury list. That would be the first year of his contract, but it would not be a year of service time. So if you do that, you can actually have him in your building for 5 years on cost control because he wouldn't get that year of service time. When his contract expired, he would be a restricted free agent, not an unrestricted free agent. And of course, fifth-year option is not in play because he'd be a second-round pick in this instance. So even though you potentially wouldn't have him in 2023, you could kind of push the cost control down the line a year, which I think may line up better for the Broncos if Russell Wilson doesn't work out, or if with Russell Wilson you want to give a year or two. Now or a couple of years. Now here's the other thing on Hendon Hooker and why he might drop in around 2. It's not just the injury, it's the age. He's 25 years old. So, he's been around for a while. There was a transfer from Virginia Tech to Tennessee. He had the COVID bonus year as well. Because of all that, you're talking about somebody who, if you play the long game with him, he might be getting on the field at age 28, right? And that's something you would have to think about in your calculus. But for me, it's, okay, here's somebody who has first-round talent at the quarterback position, has leadership attributes, reads the field really well, has a good feel for the pass rush. You can't coach feel. It's either there or it's not. If he's sitting there at 50, with all the ways that it might fit in contractually, I think you roll the dice, move up, and then effectively stash him for a year. Say this is your red shirt year. You're going to learn the offense, learn what we're doing, and if Russell Wilson doesn't work out, maybe you're ready to take the baton in 2024, and you're getting and I think you'd be getting first-round quality for a second-round price.
Yeah, there's no doubt there's first-round talent there from Hendon Hooker, and it's kind of a nice problem for the Broncos to have if they were to move up and get him. The chat rooms are lighting up, though. They're like, there's no way he's going to be. Yeah,
that's the thing. Exactly. But I think the chances are shrinking that he drops into that range where the Broncos could do it. I mean, because we saw the Mel Kiper Jr. mock draft, and he had Seattle moving back into the first round. And I think for Seattle, that makes a heck of a lot of sense to move back into round 1 and get him. So I will acknowledge, I don't expect Hendon Hooker to fall to a point where the Broncos would pull the trigger and make the move. But there is a level to which he would fall where, at minimum, in the draft room, Peyton have to have the conversation, I believe. Even though there are a lot of other ways where you could use pick 67, pick 68 to help your team now, I think you've got to have an escape hatch in case Russell Wilson doesn't work out.
Yep. Broncos will be thinking ahead, and honestly, we're kind of busy right now, Mace, but a great article is like, are you part of the Broncos' future or no? Like for a player like Javonte, who we both love and adore, like by the time the Broncos are competing for Super Bowls, Javonte's either going to be out of the league or not with the Broncos. So I think that's an examination we have to look at, and that's where a Hendon Hooker could be part of that future solutions for the Denver Broncos. I was asked, programming note, this is Inside Baseball, Mace, but I was asked today for our programming, like, hey, what are the chances the Broncos trade in the first round? I said it's 10%. Do you like that number? Is it higher or lower for you?
I'd say that's about right. And it's not that they wouldn't like to. Sean Payton has shown a history of being willing to combine picks to move up. Nobody had fewer draft picks than the New Orleans Saints from 2006 to 2021, and there were two reasons for that. One was because they had fewer comp picks than anybody else, and the second reason was that they were willing to sacrifice future capital to move up right then and there. They were willing to combine picks to move up. It was always about quality rather than quantity when Sean Payton was with the Saints. And they drafted, by and large, very well. Better than most teams in terms of the value of what they got. But just because you have that willingness doesn't mean you always have the ammunition. And right now, the Broncos, unless they are trading from their roster, they simply don't have the ammunition to get up that far.
It's orange and blue today. It is Cecil Lammey. It is Andrew Mason every single day, Monday through Friday. Actually, I have a public appearance tomorrow with Dinger. Leave Dinger alone, drunk baseball fans. But I have a public appearance with Dinger tomorrow, Mace, so I will be taking tomorrow off. I will rejoin you on Friday from the comfy confines of my home studio, which means I'll be wearing a beanie, so I don't have to do my hair. These are the things I think about. But anyway, Mace.
Just wear. You can wear a hat every
ball
day.
Cap. Yeah.
Yeah, I went ball cap today.
Ball cap every day. All right. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on Twitter at Mace Denver. I don't know what to do with my hands. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying, be safe, be kind, know that you are appreciated. Stay tuned. And as always, stay frosty.